Good evening. Again, thank you everybody for showing up tonight. My name is Russ. I am the Metro Councilman for District 13, and I want to go ahead and start this meeting by first wishing everybody a happy holiday season. And we'll go over the agenda for tonight's meeting. I want to give some legislative updates. Granted, we just started the new term, so there's not a lot in there to talk about. Give a few community updates, and then I'll go over a few development updates, and then we have a developer here to talk about a potential project that'll be going on kind of across the street here.
Hey Russ, can we just stand on the other side?
Sure.
Because a lot of us are here.
And then later this evening, school board member Dr. Berthena Nabaa-McKinney will be showing up to kind of give some updates and talk about some of the recent school policy changes that are going to go into effect this year. And then, of course, at the end, there'll be an opportunity for some questions and answers at the end. So as I said, we have just started a new term. We were sworn in late September. We started back in October. So we have had 5 meetings so far. They so far have been somewhat short and brief and few of technical issues, so knock on wood that continues. I have been assigned to 3 committees for this coming year. I've been assigned as chair of government operations and regulations, so that is codes, farmers market, fair board, law department, beer board. Anything dealing with either city regulations or codes will come before that committee. I've also been selected to serve on the Public Health and Safety Committee, as well as continuing my service on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Now, most council members only got 2. I asked for the 3rd one, Transportation and Infrastructure, mainly because of the last 4 years of serving on Public Works, then Transportation Infrastructure, building a great relationship with those department heads. And late last term, we did pass a resolution approving and asking Metro Water to study the feasibility of taking solid waste and recycling and splitting it off from Metro Water and having our standalone waste services department. And so because of that conversation going on, I wanted to stay on transportation infrastructure because that's where a lot of that will happen. And I wanted to do what I can to kind of help make that a smooth transition. The most notable bills that I have sponsored so far have just been honorary resolutions. The first one was recognizing the Nashville Irish Music School, which is based in Donaldson, out of the Williams Fine Violins on Donaldson Pike. They won the national competition last spring, and because of that, they got to go perform in Ireland at one of their main music festivals over the summer. And then, if you have ever been to Summer Shakespeare in the Park, the executive director, Denise Hicks, has announced that she is stepping down from that role. And as someone who has, since 2010, enjoyed going to Shakespeare in the Park, I wanted to honor the commitment and the service that she's done for that, and to thank her for bringing arts and making arts more accessible to Nashvilleians. And as far as legislation, the major one that I wanted to kind of keep everybody up to date about was a bill that we killed this week in regards to taser pins. So last February, MNPD came to the council asking for us to approve about almost $7 million for them to buy tasers. These were called Taser 7s. They were first released in 2018 as far as modeling here. Well, at that time, Metro was still using up the original stock. And so it wasn't until last year that they needed to replace what they had. So they replaced it with the model that was out then, which was the Taser 7. Well, fast forward a couple months, the Taser 10 is released, and Metro Police wanted to upgrade the entire department to the newest, most fanciest device. Now, as I explained to the police union and the police officers, I have no problem with equipping our officers with the most up-to-date and most efficient equipment. My biggest problem with this deal was, one, it was going to go from $7 million to $25 million. And it would cost roughly about $1 million more a year on, buying new clips, buying new supplies to work with these. Also, on top of that, we were being told, this was a bill that was going on 3 readings, this was 2nd reading, But we were told we could not defer it in order for us to learn more about it because it had to pass by the end of the year for the police department and the city to get this year's pricing. The Axon, which is the company that manufactures the equipment, would not agree or would not say on the record whether or not they would extend that pricing into the next year, and that it was not part of their business model. Even though one of my colleagues, Councilmember Porterfield, pointed out that last year, in February, when we approved the previous contract, they extended the January pricing into February so that the bill could be passed with the previous month's pricing. So between that, the late term of the bill, basically another one of these bills saying you have to pass it now or else, I, along with 24 other of my colleagues, decided that we are not going to support a bad bill, and we're not going to support a bad bill that you're trying to ram down our throats. It's not right. It's not fair to the taxpayers, and ultimately, it's not fair to our police department. And so that bill was killed. We'll see if Axon and the city come to another contract. Hopefully, one that's better for the taxpayers, better for the city. And that's that. A few things that may be coming up this year. You know, we've got East Bank development. I had a meeting with Mayor O'Connell this week, kind of talk about what my priorities are for this next term. He seemed very, very receptive and very open. The prime thing that I want to get done this term is to, at the very least, get $5 million in funding so that the city can buy the old Donaldson Heaton and Air property right down the street on Murfreesboro and Voltee, so that the city can turn that into a public library. The library system has identified this area as an area that needs investment, and the outgoing library director a couple years ago, we did a site tour. He liked it. He thought that the building itself could just be renovated, which would be another savings because you're not doing a complete build-up. Also, there's enough land that there could be a community center. If we got the land from the state across the street, there could be a park space. We could do a pedestrian bridge connecting the library to a park and possibly have a transit center right there as well. So Mayor O'Connell is very optimistic that maybe we can get that approved this term. When I was first elected, my goal was to see it built and the ribbon cut, but alas, I'll be happy with just getting the money approved for the land acquisition and the design. And then whoever follows me this next term, I got you here, get us across the finish line. I've been working for the last 4 years with Metro Animal Care and Control to increase funding and to increase public awareness of the issues facing MAC, lack of investment, poor facilities, etc. And so in the last budget last year, money was approved for both design and construction of a new animal shelter. Because of redistricting, the current animal shelter was moved out of my district, but this new one will be back in District 13. If you're familiar with the Harding Pike area that used to be in District 13, if you go just past the animal shelter, there's a series of office buildings, and in there is the new pet community center. Well, across the street will be the new shelter. It's 22 acres of land that Metro already owns. There's about 8 buildable acres, and so we're very optimistic that we can get that started within the next year or two, and then once it's started, maybe a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, have a brand new animal shelter for the city. Some community updates, just keep you in mind. In last year's budget, we did approve a series of traffic calming projects, and so this year, Wimberton Drive was one of the 85 streets that was approved for traffic calming in that budget. They should be, there was an email that was sent out to residents in that area about the process of getting the design done and the vote. And so residents in the Wimberton area have that information, and I'll be working trying to secure a site for a public meeting so that they can talk with NDOT and get that started. Also, if you, unlike me, that uses fake trees, If you have a real Christmas tree and after holidays, if you're looking for something to do with it, Metro does a Christmas tree recycling program every year. And it will run from December 27th to February 11th. And the two closest sites to District 13 will be Una Recreation Center and Two Rivers Park. Also, legislation that was passed last term, we first did all streets in the urban service district, lowering to 25 miles per hour. Well, we passed a second piece of legislation that did the same thing, but for the general services district. And so, as of now, NDOT has finished updating all those signs. So every local street, not your main streets, but your neighborhood streets, every local street in Davidson County now is like 25 miles per hour. And a big reminder, if you're in Donaldson, this Saturday at 2 o'clock is the Donaldson Hermitage Christmas Parade. And so feel free to come out, and then afterwards we'll be lighting the Donaldson Christmas tree. And with that, I want to go ahead and bring up our first speaker, which is Anita Cline with Metro Planning. I asked her to come talk to us about the community plans. If you're familiar with community plans, this area of the district is actually considered Antioch Priest Lake. And you know, when I ran in 2019, a lot of folks were like, well, we're not really Antioch. How did we become Antioch? So Ms. Cline, I asked Ms. Cline to come kind of talk about why this is, why it is, and how it was done this way, and if there's anything that can be done to amend it or not. So with that, Ms. Cline, I'll go ahead and you can come up, and we'll take questions at the end.
Are you recording? I need to stand over there, or is this,
Yeah.
or is this fine?
If you stand right there by the...
Good.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, everyone can see. So, how many people know a little bit about the planning department? So, I'm with the planning department, Anita, and you know, if you hear people talk about Nashville Next, you know, that's the city's comprehensive plan. And so that tackles like an airplane flying over, like the 30,000-foot view. You know, who do we want to be in the future? You know, how do we want to grow? What do we want to preserve? What's important for our character and whatnot? So we need a way to put that community plan, or put the general plan on the ground. Like, how does that apply then to neighborhoods and corridors and streets? And so that's where the 14 community plans come into play. And so they were actually developed back in the late 1980s as a way to put pen to paper and make those connections. So, you know, some of them are pretty straightforward as far as boundaries. Like if you look at North Nashville here, you know, it's encompassed Metro Center. You know, as you get out to the suburban areas though, especially on this whole southern loop, the boundaries can get a little wonky because back in the late 80s, while they tried to follow some man-made things, you know, rivers, but they also followed the interstate system, they wanted a way to measure population growth and forecast and things. So they used, you know, census tracts, traffic modeling that we had back then, what was called, you know, traffic zones and stuff. And so they used things like that. Well, we all know that over time, you know, census boundaries change and things like that change. And I think now, you know, the older community plans back in the 80s and 90s were like really the only time that people ever saw like maps and forecasting and population things. Because back then, if you remember, you know, there was no Google map, you know. You had paper maps, you had, you know, if you wanted to look at census data, you tended to go to the library, you know, the archives, something like that, and go way down in the basements where I spent a lot of time with demographic research. And so there wasn't any way to put it together, whereas now we have all kinds of tools, right? So, you know, between Google Maps and different things, I'm probably one of the only people in the city that thinks of things in community plan boundaries because they're arbitrary in places. You know, for instance, we can't name a community the whole name of every of the 60 neighborhoods within each community plan area, you know, so it's just a shortened name. For a long time, they were referred to by numbers. When I started years ago at planning, I hated that because that was really impersonal to me. So then we tried to come up with some names. So the bottom line is, though, is we have held firm on the boundaries over time when different people would say, hey, can I move from this community plan to another one? Simply because if we don't, then we lose all those decades of research that shows like land use changes, population changes, things like that. So that's why we hold firm on the boundaries, but from the relationship of how we plan and what we do and what the city does, it doesn't matter if you're in South Nashville or the Antioch area, simply because we don't necessarily, with all the tools we have now for engagement, with online engagement and in-person engagement and surveys and maps, you know, there's not the need to do how we used to do things back then, is we would update a whole community plan area at once, bring everybody together. Nowadays, we're much more focused on hotspots. Like, for instance, I don't need to update Jolton's community plan. They want to stay rural, right? So I don't need to go up there and spend a lot of effort. We do most of our participation now on spots that desperately need our help to balance growth and preservation. And recently, I worked with a council member on an area, Couchville Pike, out east of the airport. And that's a prime example of an area that's in 2 community plan areas, but the focus was on a geographic area that encompassed that. So that makes sense?
And I went ahead and put, there's Antioch Priest Lake and Domino Hickory, and then here's the map that you sent me.
Yeah, just showing, kind of focus in on what the boundary was. Yeah, they were using census tracts back then, is why I followed like Massman Drive and did some other things like off-private. And then you said we'll take some questions at the end if anyone has questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Anita. All right, so at this point, we'll go ahead and talk about, get some updates on some of the development that is upcoming for the district. So again, there's a couple things happening on Murfreesboro Pike right now. This one, it's the Hometown Suites that's right down the road, up kind of on a hill, kind of secluded, that has always kind of had concern, like people have been concerned about crime, the stuff going on in that area. So a developer is trying to get this under contract. We are currently trying to remove the PUD, or the plan unit design, that is currently on it. This is the same developer that, if you are familiar with the Roadway Inn and Hermitage, this developer bought this motel and converted it into studio apartments for working class and workforce housing. Currently, that project is 95% rented out, and that same developer is wanting to take this hotel and do the same thing, provide some workforce housing right here on Murfreesboro Pike, which, as I was explaining to someone earlier, the 55 bus, which is the main WeGo bus that goes up and down Murfreesboro Pike, is the most used transit line in the state. And so having dense housing on Murfreesboro Pike will make sense, because not everybody here would need a car. They can get on the bus right here and go to work. Plus, even though these will be rentals, right now what you've got here is a crime-ridden hotel that brings nothing but bad people to the community. And so hopefully by making it workforce housing and cleaning up the area, also ensuring that it's gated so that only the people who belong there are there, will help improve kind of the safety and the appeal of the neighborhood.
But Russ, before you go on to anything else, is this the same developer that did behind McDonald's Donaldson Pike right there at Royal Parkway?
I don't think so. I think this is a different developer.
Spoke at one of these meetings?
No, that project is, if you're talking about Shangri-La,
Yes.
that project is down in District 28.
Project beyond Splash.
It got moved to District 28 now, so it's no longer in my district. So I passed that off to the next council member. They waited until August to start moving on it, and by then I said, well, we've had a new election. That's no longer my district. You'll have to work with the incoming council member for that area to get that done.
But this is not the same thing.
This is not. This hotel is actually right down the road.
Which hotel is it? Is it Golden Holiday Inn?
It's a Hometown Suite. So you know where Glengarry, T-Bones, and the Murfreesboro Pike?
The one on the hill?
Yep. And so if you go right up, it's right in there. You usually can't see it from the road because it's back there surrounded by
Yeah.
trees. Yes, and here's Glengarry Road Drive right here. And I think this is that old rundown brick liquor store. It's right there. All right. This next project, we have the developer here to kind of talk about it. This is the property, I believe it's actually right there, isn't it? Right there. So I'll invite them to kind of come up and talk about this a little bit, give you some more information. Since I was having this meeting anyway, that's why I went ahead and had them come and talk instead of having a separate community meeting. But I'll go ahead and then you want to use the clicker or the
Sure,
PowerPoint?
absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't know which one it is. There we go. All right. Well, very good. Thank you so much. My name is Tyler Thayer. I'm with Paradigm Studio. We're an architecture firm local here in Nashville. We have been, the owners of this property are here, Frank and Brent, father and son duo. So they're actually owners, not necessarily developers, but coming in, but they are owning the property. They're wanting to do this new development on the property and maintain ownership. And so they're very passionate about it. And actually, Brent's office is in the building. So they're locals doing a project here. And so these are the two dark gray with the kind of the darker gray windows. They're like two cubes right next to each other. Really cool kind of old modern architecture. And it has like parking all the way around it, and they're kind of more centralized.
Can you orient us a little bit?
Sure. This right here is Murfreesboro Pike. So we're actually on the screen. We're currently over here on the opposite side of Murfreesboro Pike.
Is it where the old Directory Insurance Company used to be? Right behind the...
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are the two cubed kind of style buildings that kind of sit back off of Murfreesboro Pike. Are you familiar with it? Does that help understand where it is? Right off the interstate, right here is the train tracks, and the interstate on like off ramp is like right here and kind of comes right here.
The Briley off-ramp.
Right, or not the interstate, Briley. Right off Briley, kind of get on off ramp, and you come right here, and it's like right on the right, coming down here. So when I came down Briley to get over here, came off, and the two buildings are on the right, almost right up here.
What's the nearest cross street?
Really, Briley and McGavick is this. So this is McGavick and Murfreesboro. Right here, right here is McGavick and Murfreesboro, and then Briley is like right here.
Yeah, the property right behind, for a while, people have complained about homeless living in that property right behind. We've been working to get that cleaned up. So, yeah, if you're familiar with Murfreesboro Pike and McGavick, it's right there on that corner.
There's an auto body shop right in that corner.
Right. I'm just confused by the Murfreesboro. Is it behind the other body?
It's
Yes,
sort
so
of-
the auto body's here, and the two buildings are right here.
Or you can see it.
Yeah, you can probably look right up there and see it.
When we're done, we can walk up to the screen. We'll be glad to look at it.
It's a parking lot.
But in general, the property is currently zoned, I think it was CL. A part of the community character overlay, the policy that's in there, allows for rezoning to OG. We've spoken with planning staff and also the councilman and talked about what we could do. And so what we're looking to do is to do a straight rezone. So it's not a specific plan or a PUD or something like that, but it's actually within the policies. So the overlaying policies within the zoning ordinances, the zoning designs, the restrictions, those kind of things, that's what we're looking at, is taking it from a CL to an OG. When doing so, it would allow us to do some multifamily and retail on the site, potentially retail. And so conceptually, we're looking at potentially a building up here kind of towards Murfreesboro Pike. We've explored potentially putting it in the back, and we've explored down the site. We're very early in the process, and that's why we wanted to contact and have the conversation about all the options and get feedback on the process. What the desire is, talking to Frank, is really to be more of a workforce house. So we heard about the workforce housing, not luxury apartments necessarily, but good quality, well done apartment building, rentals, but that it would be more oriented towards a workforce kind of, and also we have office on the site. And the community character overlay that's on this also emphasizes that office needs to be the primary function of this, but that when we switch to an OG, a mixed use environment is appropriate, bringing in some of these other uses that all complement one another and also complements the corridor that is Murfreesboro Pike. And so we believe that infusing this type of multifamily into this site would be an appropriate kind of move. And so pretty much this is about all we've done so far is some conceptual site planning of where this building might be located on the site. We've talked about what that might look like with you, and then he invited us out here, and so we're really thankful to be here and appreciative. And that's about all I have to talk about at the moment, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and then the owners are also here to answer any questions as well, kind of at the end. It sounds like we're going to have any, I guess, do you have anything you would like me to speak to?
Well, also when we had our conversation, I went ahead and put on here, like, there's a conversation about because of the ridership here on Murfreesboro Pike, and to my knowledge, the only bus stop that's on this side of Murfreesboro Pike is all the way down near Dell. And so people would have to cross Murfreesboro Pike to get on the bus stop. So we've talked about the potential of some of the property being used for either a bus stop, bus shelter, or working with WeGo to do something so that, again, it's apartments, it's rentals. A lot of people complain when you talk about large, dense multifamily, they complain about the traffic. Well, let's utilize this transit line that is widely used in the city, so individuals, if they're not lucky enough to get a job in these buildings already, they can use the bus system to get downtown and get to their jobs, so therefore reducing the reliance on public transit. Reducing the reliance on cars so that there's not as much traffic on Murfreesboro Pike. And so, again, nothing's been set in stone yet. Nothing's been filed with the planning department. With everything, with all the meetings I have when it comes to development, we talked about, let the community see what you're wanting to do. If the community has feedback or questions or concerns about it, they can send those to me, and I can then work with developers, see what can be kind of tweaked or massaged on that. And then if we update the plans in any way, then we have another meeting. That way, every step of the process, the community is informed and knows what's going on. Also, the thing that I'm excited about this is because the property is already owned and it's not somebody buying the property, that means the housing would be affordable for our workforce. Most times when you see development, part of the cost you're paying is the land. And so I'm excited about this possibility because the owners are not buying the land, they already own it. And that's an investment they don't have to make, so that can be used to help ensure that the housing will be affordable for those, especially for teachers, first responders, people who work for the city, could afford to live in the city and utilize our transit system.
Can I ask a quick question about this? Are you planning any green space for these multifamily folks to,
So there is a
walk their dog or take their kid out on, not just a parking lot?
Right. So far, we haven't gotten that far into the project yet, but there is a desire to provide amenity space to this. We've explored even things like pickleball and those kind of things that might be available to
You're going to piss residents off of pickleball.
Hmm?
So you're going to piss residents off of pickleball. It's part of the
Might not be a good solution, but like I said, we're very early. But the answer is yes, there would be amenities for the residents that live there. We have not gotten that far down the process to figure that out yet, but
We're not even quite sure the exact location for the building yet.
Gotcha, yeah.
But maybe we're showing it, maybe in the back end. It's a process that we have done. We're in the process of moving tenants into, as you know, both buildings are empty now. And we're in the process of moving in a tenant probably by April in one of the buildings, taking 3 or 5 floors. So things are starting to move forward.
Yeah, it's a great idea, when those who need workforce,
Yeah.
housing and just that on Murfreesboro, like there's not a lot of, green space.
And if I'm not mistaken,
They're gonna live on it.
If I'm not mistaken, the tenant that's about to move in is Metro Action Commission or one of the Metro
We
agencies.
weren't going to mention that yet.
Yeah. Well, we just approved the lease, so.
public.
Whoever's here stays here.
Sure.
I love the camaraderie.
Just curious how that, great. I'm just curious how that falls into line with the National Next plan for this area.
Nashville, that's how it is.
How the project would?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's where you want to put growth. Your most growth is on the corridors, right? Because that's how you get a lot of times increased green space, more sidewalks, more bike lanes, more transit, right? And so that's also a way though to balance, to get some of the growth pressure off some of the single buzz pressure. So I think in the ideal community, the ideal suburban community, you would have, you guys are kind of on the edge transitioning from urban to suburban, a little more towards downtown, you're a little more urban in character. But you would have these walkable places on the corridor where you could maybe drive or walk from your home and pick up a gallon milk, or go out to eat, or go, have some place to walk to, as opposed to doing like 10 trips a day in your car. That's the way to get some of this traffic, and we're not gonna stop growing anytime soon, right? We're so popular, we're a victim of our own success almost. And so, so have people, have that option to take the bus for some trips or walk for some trips. We're not gonna give up our cars necessarily either, but at least instead of constantly trip after trip after trip in a private vehicle, some ways to do some different things and grow. So we're all at planning, we're all for mixing up uses along the corridor. For a long time, our zoning and things put things in pods. We wanted industrial over here, and residential over here, and office over here. Now corridors like to mix it up.
Do you have a ballpark idea of how many units you're thinking?
I think we're probably looking at about 100, 120, somewhere in that range. Could be a little bit more, could be a little less, and it also, depending on where Frank and Brent decide ultimately, through this discussions where we want it on site, the control planes, the high control planes that are part of that district kind of control how it is. And then we're also being sensitive to, we have 2 really nice office buildings that are about to get new tenants, as we just heard, and not covering them up. So how to marry all that together, like an old, and these buildings, as nice as they are an older typology within architecture. So today, we wouldn't put them all the way back and have the parking in the front. We would have them kind of more front and center and parking in the rear or underneath or something of that nature. But this is where our parking is for this use. So there's a careful balance of how to not cover up the office and make them lesser quality, which would not be good for the community and for the users, while also trying to infuse this mixed use that we're looking for. So we're still trying to figure it out, but I think we're getting there, I guess, and especially with all this feedback, and it's helpful.
So whatever we do with this particular building is going to be nice. We're not going to jeopardize our investment into office buildings sitting right there.
Right.
So it's going to have to complement what we're doing.
Okay, we're not gonna stop going with the fire. I rode down here from, say up around Russell Creek down, it's just hard. Came down from where I live and came on down and got on the couch. When I go to work at Danville, I've given up on 440. I go all the way down around the fairgrounds, where what used to be fairgrounds. And I guess I've been in Nashville for a long time. I don't see how you can say we're not going to stop going, because I think this kind of road is just not sustainable as far as traffic. You're not going to get people to walk 2 miles to a grocery store. Now some people on Bell Road are doing that now, because you can probably get there faster walking. But homes out now, because you end up having 8 to 13 people in a unit that was only designed for no more than 2 or 4. I don't, there's got to be some way, to honestly and realistically consider, the impacts that this is already gonna have on a stressed infrastructure. And very stressed, you know. We had a lot of people come and talk to us last year, some kind of thing it was, and the entire infrastructure.
It's a strain.
Yeah, Louisville was built together with their rings and everything, and exposed now. Nashville wasn't designed, we must have had, the traffic engineers were significant deficits or something, because this city's just not designed, it just kind of broke.
It was reaction.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was, that's the kind of stuff that keeps us as planners up at night, because in an ideal world, you would build infrastructure first before you need it, right? But that's not how it often works, because you need some of the private development money to balance the public money to pay for it, right? And so we've kind of worked ourselves as a city into some of these predicaments, because this is a statement that is not popular with people. Your single-family development, I live in Antioch, and I live in a single-family neighborhood, so I'll say that too. I'm in a single-family house. Single-family neighborhoods do not pay for themselves. They place a burden on the city's infrastructure as far as their taxes do not cover everything that's paid for. Street lights, garbage pickup, recycling, stormwater, all that. And so, downtown, believe it or not, ends up paying, subsidizing a lot of people's way of life across the city with all that money. But we've got to find a way to balance, so we're way behind, right? Because for decades, after World War II, for decades, people did not value sidewalks. They did not value, they said, hey, my suburban lot's gonna be my green space. We don't need a lot of green space. We don't need a lot of parks. So a lot of people didn't value that. And so now it's like, okay, we want to get back to that, right? We want to get back to having a lot of tree cover. And so, at my office, what people don't see are all the people that we say no to about development every single day, right? You only hear about the ones that might make it through the gate, and can say, hey, we're out here with this project. So we do consider things like infrastructure, green space, all those kinds of things. But at the same time, if you watch what we do a lot of planning, some of the good planning that we try to do, we're up against the state legislature, and we're in a very strong property rights state, as all of you know. And so if we try to exact anything more from a developer than this, what's called a rational nexus between what they're trying to do, then we get in trouble and lawsuits happen. And so, there's that fine line between when somebody like these folks come and they say, hey, we want to do this, and we say, I'm just throwing out things because I have not met with them. Just throw out things like, hey, we want you to put a bus stop up near the street, and hey, can you put a little, can you break up that parking with some landscape medians and islands, and can you go ahead and build a sidewalk, up to this residential neighborhood that's adjacent to you down the street a little bit. So there's all those kinds of things in play that we'll work with developments one by one on as they come in and try to get there. But the hard thing is we're behind on so many things. And you look at, there's some great things about being a consolidated city county government, right? And there's some great things about it, but then there's some negatives. If you see like how many miles of sidewalks, public works, NDOT's responsible for, and how many streets and things like that. So yes, our infrastructure, we got a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I understand that, but like, this is before Russ's time. It was back, I think, I don't know if it's Holland, but off of Bell Road on Pleasant View, there was a guy who wanted to put in a bus, a boat or whatever,
Oh, yes, yes. Storage,
And
boat
at
storage.
that time, I was doing research, because that's gonna be really close to me, and Bell Road is really narrow. Well, at that time, even way back then, there had been some research done nationally and by the state, and Bell Road, that's Bell Road, was like, I think, the seventh most congested traffic corridor in Davidson County. They're built up all over the place, but, you know, whatever it is, Aaron Point, you know, that was added, that, you know, thousands more cars, and not a penny has been done about the road. And I don't know that much can be done, because you're still gonna have these places where you can't, unless you just blast houses and everything out of the way.
Right.
So at some point, really and truly, things have to stop, or if a fire happens somewhere, it's gonna look a whole lot like in Gatling Road. There's one way in and one way out, there's a lake there, unless you can swim really, really well, you're not gonna be able to go that way. So, is there any way you all can take things like that into consideration?
We do, and I know it's not an easy answer either, but I mean, we do take things, you know, like if you watch a rezoning happen, like watch this as this rezoning goes through the process, you know, it's not just planning, taking a look at it, it's all the metro departments. So you'll have like, NDOT say things about it, you'll have, you know, stormwater, fire, you know, all these different departments say things about, you know, capacity, you know, what are the capacity issues, what needs to happen, and things. It's just tough because, you know, you can't make someone, like a new development coming in is like, you don't create more, like you can't create more stormwater runoff than what was there before, right? Even if it was pristine, right? But you can't make that development team fix the whole watershed stormwater problems. And so it's just that fine balance. But I hear you. I mean, if I did not work for the planning department, I would be like, what in the world is going on?
Well, see, that was the thing, when they did that, that was zoned for, like, individual, like, residential. And they changed the zoning to accommodate this. So if, you know, we didn't, if we
For
weren't
like Aaron Point, are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about Aaron Point was one of them, but also the storage of both structures.
Yes, yes.
And I was at the city council meetings, it felt like all the time for that. But, yeah, this is just, you know, these are the concerns that most people I know.
Right.
I mean, I don't care what party you're in, or anything, these are things
No, I
that
hear you.
people that live here are
Right.
really at a very deep level concerned with.
Yeah, concern and
Because
frustration.
quality of life is just has tanked. I mean, it's not the bottom, but
Right,
it's definitely declined.
Right.
And when you have to take 2 hours to get home from work from Vanderbilt, it's 12 hours. I mean,
No,
12 mile drive.
it's very bad.
That's ridiculous.
Yes, I know.
That's all.
Well,
Everybody's time.
I'll have one little thing to say. You're doing the right thing. These, unfortunately, there's not more you hear, because obviously District 13 is much larger, but this is the thing. And then you elect forward-thinking council members. I loved hearing talking about the public library and thinking down the road, and like the fact that we're thinking it's a, you know, it's a 4-year project. But one thing I will say about Metro is there's a lot of money. There's only so much money, but there's a lot of money going into infrastructure. I got a structural engineer friend that's working on the sewer expansion, and it has become the largest project in Metro history, and it is unfathomable how big this project is, and you've probably never heard of it. But it's really going to take care of all of our water quality. It's going to be working through that, and it is a huge 10 or 15-year project now. But that's happening because people are forward thinking. It's just hard to see it, to feel it, because it's not the traffic. The traffic directly impacts you. But if sewer went down, it would be worse. So I think probably planning commission, they're looking at these things.
And I'll kind of add to that too. So Anita kind of mentioned earlier that we have done a new update or looked into the Couchville Pike plan of how it's being developed. And so because we understand that there's growth happening there, there's future growth coming in. There's also the issue with there's no infrastructure out there. So that's one reason you see a boat storage place, because guess what? They don't need sewer. These industrial warehouses, they don't need as much sewer as a residential. So that's why you see a lot of it going out there. So this year's capital improvements budget, and something that I told Mayor O'Connell that was on my priority list, was Let's follow the example of what Metro did in Century Farms in Antioch. Metro went out ahead of time, built out the infrastructure that was needed because they knew at the time you're going to have IKEA, you're going to have all this office and shopping out there. So they're like, let's go out, be proactive for a change, put the infrastructure in there, and then as the area developed, developers would pay a fee. That fee would help reimburse Metro for what we put out there. And so I've kind of listed it as a Couchville Pike development area, but I put in the CIB that and kind of explained it as investing in the infrastructure in an area we know has grown, will continue to grow, because again, Nashville, even though we're over 520 something miles in square mileage, and we're kind of getting low on land, and so that's one reason you do see more kind of high density developments kind of make best use of the land. That also means the areas where we do have available land, like Couchville Pike and Delano area, people are going to be looking at developing out there. And so let's be proactive. Let's get the stormwater. Let's get the sewer lines out there. Let's widen the roads, put in some multimodal access so that we don't have a 2-lane road having to handle all this traffic. Let's go ahead, make it a boulevard with a turn lane so that people who are trying to turn don't have to block traffic. Putting lighting out there, doing the things that we need to do that we know people are going to say, well, this is why I'm against this project, because we don't have X, Y, and Z. Let's go ahead and put X, Y, and Z out there so that it makes these developments more palatable and for the community, and while at the same time giving a benefit to the community, because if we put that infrastructure out there, then that's going to make it easier for people to commute, because now you've got wider roads and you're having more access and more variety when it comes to transit options. So that is something I've spoken to the mayor about. It's on my capital improvements budget for this year, and because I think we need to be looking proactively at areas where we're seeing growth and we're hearing talk of development. Because as I've stated before, the city has been poor when it's come to planning. We've allowed planning to happen to us and not for us. And so that's been my biggest motto for these last 4 years is I'm fine with development as long as it happens for us and not to us. And so I think this will be a good conversation to continue having to see how can we make a development here that is both that benefit this immediate community while not at the same time harming communities downstream. And so this is just early talk. We heard issues about green space or on trees. Maybe it's something to look into and be forward thinking a green roof on the facility, or finding ways that there's going to be parking garage or parking lots, ways to reclaim that water to use for irrigation or to use for other non-drinking uses. Like, look at ways like that. That way we end up making something that makes the property better.
And the great thing about Metro is with the new LIDs and the separation of sewer and sanitary, green roofs are becoming almost a standard now. I mean, it's almost on every one of our projects, so it makes the place better. But thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to present it and to discuss.
No problem.
More amazing. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm again, I'm supportive of this kind of addition to the neighborhood. This property backs up to some woods just on the left-hand side.
Yes. And a railroad, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Will that be encroached upon all by this, or that just kind of backs up to our neighborhood? So I'm just trying to figure out.
No, the property line is here on the edge of the woods,
Okay.
and so everything would be internal to the property line.
Again,
How
this
are
is,
you gonna replace that parking? I mean, so you're eating up part of your parking lot, right?
That's what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay.
So you don't own, I guess, south of the parking lot underneath you?
Just two on the others. There is a buffer here that will remain. That's part of the zoning ordinance.
Right.
But the parking is all owned, and that buffer is also owned by the property.
okay, we're not sure yet where we're gonna put that building, either where he shows it or behind the other two buildings back on the bottom.
Right, okay.
We're not quite sure yet.
The best way of saying is it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, or it could be here. So, but I wanted them to at least have something that you could see.
Yeah.
so that you can kind of have an idea of what they're doing. And
Green space, just when we're talking about those trees, and there's a lot of good green space around the
The goal is to stay within the already paved boundaries, which are, if that makes sense.
This is strictly on our parking.
Yeah, it's good. So the parking lot, all the trees are off of it. We're not expanding the parking lot. And I think there's actually buffers on the lot, because I think this is actually a PUD, but I think it's a residential one, and I think that's why the green trees are there. Because of the buffer.
yeah, this is like this is about a 6-acre lot that before my time was zoned SP for like 33 units. For the last 4 years, the owners kept asking me if I would be willing to increase the number of units. I always say, let's have a community meeting, let's get public input, and then I never hear back for a year or two. Then they come back and say, hey, would you be open to, I'm like, let's go through the process.
I don't know about all the neighbors, but the potential for mixed use is a little even more exciting than just housing.
Yeah, because that's one thing this area doesn't have a lot of, is basically it doesn't have a lot of reasons for residents to stay and shop here. And that's one part of my, I've been working for the last couple of years with business owners on the upper side of Murfreesboro Pike, because I want to see this corridor, develop and kind of bounce back. My partner, he's lived here his whole life. His family had a pharmacy on Thompson Place, and so he remembered when you had Fifth Quarter, you had these nice places to hang out. This is where you came for, business executives came for lunch. This is where you came for a Friday, Saturday night. Will it become the next 12 South? Probably not in my lifetime, but I would like to see opportunities for mixed use, for some businesses, some dining options to come into the area so that residents are not going to Hermitage or Mount Juliet or other areas in order to shop and play and get something to eat. So that was one thing when we had this conversation. I said, I think mixed use is a great use for this property because there's no way you're going to do single family on this lot and it be effective. And again, it's on a transit rider line that is the busiest and most used in the state. Therefore, you won't need, ideally you wouldn't need as much parking because people have more of an incentive to take public transit. And so I think this is a great opportunity. If you followed me for the last 4 years, you know that I've really not brought any multifamily or large developments, mainly because a lot of those opportunities were not on the corridors. They were in more residential areas where we wanted to protect kind of that single family, low density habitat. This is the fact that I am supportive of doing a higher density mixed use on a major corridor, I think speaks volumes. As Anita said, they get a lot of questions and a lot of applications. Same thing for me. I'd probably say for every 3 developers that reaches out to me about a project, only 1 will get to the point of this having a community. I even say 1 out of 10 developers gets to this point. Or very early on, I had someone say, hey, would you be supportive of putting a strip club on Murfreesboro Pike? I said, absolutely not. Like, I know the community, I know what they want, and in certain areas, I know what they will not support, and so I have those conversations, and so our next guest has arrived, so thank you so much for this. Again, this is not a final plan. This is just hey, what would you think about this? And so we'll have further conversations. Again, if you have any thoughts about this that may make it a better plan, or you have some concerns about it, shoot me an email. I'll collect those, and maybe after the holidays, we'll get back together. I'll give that information to you. You can kind of work through it and see how we can maybe adjust or come up with another plan, and we'll have another meeting, and we'll make sure that by the time this is filed, everybody is okay with it, and then we can go ahead and go forward with it. Now, this was on my last town hall, but I wanted to go ahead and keep it on here just because I don't know how many people were there or remember. But this is where the old Silverados used to be. If you've traveled up and down Murfreesboro Pike, you've seen Silverados go down, you've seen this come up. As of right now, I don't know what tenants will be in it, but this is basically going to be a mixed-use office and commercial retail little strip mall, and the parking is going to be in the back. And so, hopefully, having this will bring in more opportunities for businesses that the community wants. When the owners first reached out, I wanted to do an SP so that we could kind of prohibit certain uses, because this area already has enough liquor stores, tobacco places. You know, we don't want any mattress stores. The community said they wanted cafes, coffee shops, restaurants. There's no doctor's offices in the area or any kind of office space like for families like that. So they didn't want to do the SP, so I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that maybe we can see some decent businesses come here to again entice people to stay in Murfreesboro Pike. The more people that we can get to stay here, to invest their money here, then we can maybe attract more investment. And MAPCO and 7-Eleven have just spent millions of dollars putting brand new gas stations. When I say big whoop, a gas station. MAPCO and 7-Eleven, they've spent a lot of money MAPCO renovated their existing structure. 7-Eleven is building brand new. So I'm hoping that's a sign that businesses and the investment is looking at this area as an area that is ripe for revitalization. And so if we can have more opportunities with this plan to bring in better businesses and show developers and show the business community that we want to stay and shop in our own community, that we'll get that investment. With that, I will go ahead and invite our distinguished school board rep for District 4, which is on the other side of the airport, is Dr. Berthena Nabaa-McKinney, to kind of give us an update on the state of education, not just in national, maybe in the state, but just to kind of give us a little information on that. If you want to go ahead and come up, Doctor.
Hey everyone, how are you? Good. Hope you guys are having a wonderful evening. You want me to get in front of the camera? Yes. Gotcha. Hope you guys are having a wonderful evening. I've been from place to place to place today, and this is hopefully my final stop. But as Russ mentioned, I am Berthena Nabaa-McKinney. I serve as the District 4 school board member, so I represent Donaldson, Hermitage, and Old Hickory, and the 18 elementary, middle, and high schools in that particular area, which overlaps Russ's district as well as 4 other council members. So I have a total of 5 council members that I represent in their constituents. So glad to be here today and so glad to be a part of this. Russ asked me to give you guys an update just about where we are with Metro Nashville Public Schools and the things that are happening with Metro. How many of
grading and vouchers as well?
Yeah, with vouchers and all of that. How many of you know a lot about our school system? We serve a little over 80,000 students across Davidson County within our schools. We have about 149 schools in our district, both elementary, middle, and high, and some early learning schools as well. And so some of the things that we want to hit on really quick that's coming down the pipeline, if you haven't seen it in the news, one is about school vouchers that would take public funds to give to families to attend private schools and home schools. The other concern that's coming down the pipeline is the A through F grading system, where each school will receive an A through F grade based on the criteria that the state has developed. And then the other thing is our 3rd grade retention law. You guys heard a lot about it last year. It's going to impact us this year in addition to 4th grade. And you'll hear a lot of legislation about it as the general session comes up. So there's a lot of things going on in education, and we're really, really super busy. So starting with the 3rd grade retention, last year the state of Tennessee enacted a law that required students who did not meet the necessary benchmark in literacy when they took their end of the year state exam for those students to be retained. There was some caveat in that if students went to summer school or they received 101 tutoring, if those students had
if there were students with disabilities, they would be exempt. Some students who were English language learners, if they were in their first 1 or 2 years, there was some exemptions for there, or any student who was retained. At the time when we had the initial law, with all of the, with the information that we had at the time for Metro National from the state, we had initially determined or thought that about 60% of our students in Metro Nashville public schools would be retained in the 3rd grade. A surprise to that is only about 1.2% ended up being retained out of that 60%. So there was a lot of changes that continued to happen along the way. And so it only narrowed down to about 1.2%. Any student being retained is a concern for us. So even in that 1.2%, in the scheme of things, it looks good, but it's still a concern to us because that's an individual child and that impacts the family. And it impacts their lifelong education. So in doing so, we were able to move 3rd grade students ahead. However, with the new law, there were exemptions that were allowed for 3rd grade for students to move on to 4th grade. However, as the current law sits for 4th grade, there are no exemptions. So if a student that moved to that 4th grade takes that state test at the end of 4th grade, those students will be, the way the current law sits, there are no exemptions or anything, those students would be retained. And so you're gonna see a lot of legislation and a lot of discussion about how that impact will have for not only Metro Nashville public students, but for students across the state, and how that impacts them across the state. And so just be aware of what that discussion looks like, and what the caveats and what that impact will look like for students in our school district. The second thing was school vouchers. So personally, school vouchers are a big concern. When we think about funding for Metro Nashville Public Schools, I don't know if many of you are aware of how our funding structure works. But you hear the state a lot talk about how they fund education at 70%, and the local government funds at 30%. In Metro Nashville, Davidson County, that's flipped. The state funds us at about 28%, and I think it's going down to about 23 that we're looking at, and then we pick up the rest. And so when we talk about funding public education, it's because we are not getting that equitable funding from our state for education.
Is that true for Memphis and Chattanooga and
Nope.
Knoxville as well?
Nope.
Just Davidson County?
Just Davidson County.
Wow.
Just Davidson County. We are
And
the
how do
only
they
district.
justify that?
Yeah, we are the only district out of the 147 districts that receive the lowest allocation from the state. I take that back. There's one other, which is Sevierville, because of their tax rate, but they can apply for a grant for rural education. So they get that money back in a different way. So we are the only one in the 147 districts in
How
our
do they
state.
justify that?
Because they say that we have a high tax revenue. Downtown, even though we don't get that money, downtown. And so they're saying that we can put more money into education. And so that's why we really rely on our council people. We rely on y'all to really build in and support public education in our state. It's not fair. We've been fighting this. We've had litigation around it. It is a constant process that we have been able to do, to push. And so it really is going to take, I don't know what it's going to take at this point to fix that, but there's still a lot of work and a lot of fuss and a lot of push around that.
My suggestion would be talk to your friends and family who live in other
Yeah.
districts of the state and tell them to support candidates who support public education and will treat everybody equally. Because that's how this is going to change, is state legislators doing what's right and treating everybody equally.
Yeah. The burden of education in Nashville, Davidson County falls on you. Whether you have kids in school or not, it falls on you, it falls on your tax dollars, it falls on your property taxes. However we fund education, we're funding it at about 70, 72% here in Nashville, Davidson County. And so that's why you hear us talk about it so much, is because you're picking up the hefty bill when it comes to, all of you are picking up the hefty bill when it comes to education in our city.
Which means these vouchers, if passed, that's less money
Yeah.
coming to us from the state, which means you're paying more for our city schools.
Yeah. So that comes back to when we talk about our charter schools that have opened up across our city. You'll hear a lot of fuss about charter funding, taking away from funding that will go towards education. Every charter school in Nashville that has been approved by Metro Nashville or approved by the state, they get their allocation off the top. So if we approve a $1.2 billion budget for education here for Metro Nashville Public Schools, their percentage, right off the top, we get what's left to have to do what we need to do to support kids in our schools. And on top of that, the way the state constitution is set up, or the legislation is set up, we have no authority over those schools. They are essentially public-private partners, because they have their own nonprofit, their own boards that oversee their individual school or their individual school system. So anything that Metro Nashville Public Schools doesn't necessarily apply to our charter schools. And when it comes to suggestions towards improvement, that's all it is suggestions. And so we have to be kind of mindful of that. The state has created it this way, and so it's not really an us versus them, it's a us versus us in a way that if we are looking at schools that are struggling, if parents have children in schools that are struggling, and parents come to us all the time from our charter partners, there's really nothing we can do. We have to send them back to their own boards and their own facilities. So it kind of creates some disconnect there to be able to support every family in Metro Nashville. When it comes to vouchers, that is another method of additionally taking funds away from our public school system for us to be able to support students. Keep in mind, public schools is where all students have to come. We can't discriminate against any student. Every single student, whether they're a student with disability, a student with ELL, a low socioeconomic student, a high socioeconomic student, all students come. We accept all students to public schools. When it comes to vouchers, private schools can pick and choose which students they take. And so a prime example, I was at an event earlier today. A parent has her child, she has two children, one is in private, one is in public. There was a question that asked, she has a student with disabilities that's in our public school system, and the question was asked, well, why didn't you choose to put your other child into a private school as well? And she said, because they wouldn't accept it. And so they have the choice to pick and choose. They also have no accountability. So when it comes to third grade retention tests, our private schools don't have to worry about a third grade retention test. When it comes to that accountability piece, our private schools are not, they don't have to account to those things. So basically, we have public schools that have all these laws and restrictions. Our hands are tied behind our back, and our partners in the education world don't have the same restrictions that we do. When
You
it
need
comes
to get this on TV.
Huh?
You need to get that on
Yeah.
TV. You need to educate the public.
You explain it in a way that everybody can understand it,
Yeah.
which is the,
So it's not
nonsense that comes
Yeah, so
out
it's
of-
not a matter of blocking choice for families. Families have always, there's this misnomer that families haven't had the ability or the choice to pick schools for their kids. That's a misnomer. Parents have always had the ability to pick schools for their kids. What we are saying is public dollars belong in public schools, because that's where the accountability is. It is not in our private schools, it's not in our home schools, it's not there. So a homeschool parent who takes that voucher and spends $7,000, that homeschool parent is not accountable to a third grade retention test. They're not accountable to ensure that their kids are growing. And if they decide that they want to put that child back in public schools, that hurts our public schools if that child hasn't had a strong education when they come back to us. That counts against us, and we're held accountable to that. And so we have to make sure that if we are doing these, that we're holding people accountable, whether you're public, private, own school, whatever, everybody should be held accountable to the same act when it comes to educating our kids, when it comes to public dollars. And so, yes ma'am.
What about the federal funding? Where the state?
Oh my goodness, that's another one.
Sense.
Yeah, so,
Our money.
yeah, so we pay federal taxes. And so our state started looking up to see how they could reject federal funding for education. As you just heard, we only receive, Metro Nashville only receives about 28% from the state. So if you take away state funding, if you're not giving us state funding, and then you're taking away federal funding too, how are we gonna educate kids? It's almost impossible. And federal funding takes care of students with disabilities. It takes care of lunch, free and reduced lunch for families who can't afford to provide lunch for their families. It takes care of professional development and training for our teachers. It takes care of students who are learning English for the first time in our country. It takes care of a lot of those title programs for our most neediest students. Also, there's a lot of funding put for students who are in low socioeconomic status. It provides a lot of funding for resources and education to be able to support them. And so when we look at taking those away, we're saying why? My question to you is why? What's the point of taking away from that funding when those who are most vulnerable need that education and need that funding? And what regulations are you trying to remove? Because we heard a lot about, well, we don't want the strings attached. Well, what strings are there that are attached? We can't quite get that answer. So if you guys can help us get that answer, we don't know. Like we will still take care of and provide supports for students with disabilities. We will still help non-English students learn English. We will still help students in low socioeconomic status get the resources they need to be able to learn. And so we don't understand the strings. And we haven't been able to get an answer on that. But based on there was a committee that was set up recently, last month.
Yeah.
There was a committee that was set up last month. They talked to districts across our state, both rural districts and urban school districts, and all of them talked about the devastating impact. If our state has extra money that's available to replace federal funding, then why don't you just add that to the amount of money that you provide for education? Because we're ranked 34th in the country when it comes to education funding. So why don't, instead of supplanting it, why don't you surplus it and add that to more on how you fund education in our state? So, any questions on the vouchers? I'm sorry, I'm coming with doom and gloom. We got a lot going on in education, y'all.
Thank you for the work.
You're welcome.
You are a good person for speaking.
Thank you.
Well, and that's why I invited her here, because
Yeah.
we've got to get this information out in front of folks.
Yeah.
The more educated voting base is trying to make better decisions and be able to reach out to your state legislatures and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. We don't like this. Keep education public, keep the funding public, no to vouchers, no
Yeah.
to rejection of
Well, we
funds.
don't like gerrymander districts and.
And the other thing is, we're not shy about accountability. Hold us accountable. Hold us accountable. With Metro, I've served on the board for 2 years. I'm in my second year now on the board. Previously, I served in 2020 for an interim term. And during that time, even out of the pandemic, you hear a lot about learning loss and how students lost a lot of learning during the pandemic. The reality is, in Metro Nashville Public Schools, not only have students recovered learning, but they recovered prior to pre-pandemic levels when it comes to their learning. We have, for the last two years in a row, have been a level 5 district, which is the highest level that a state can assign a district to receive. So 2 years in a row, we are working on a 3P. We want to be 3 years in a row, and this hasn't happened in more than a decade. And so we are moving in the right direction with the surplus of funds that we receive. I tell everyone the pandemic was a blessing in disguise. One, it got parents activated where parents weren't activated. I mean, I'm a teacher, I've been a school leader, a principal, and you know, it's hard to get parents to parent-teacher conferences. That's the reality of it. So the blessing is parents come into our schools, be activated, be engaged. The other blessing is we receive funding that we had never received before, and we are seeing a return on our investment from that by the way we are educating kids and the way that they are succeeding. And so this is so important. In that note, the other thing that we're having to deal with is because we received those federal funding, now it's coming to an end. It ends in 2024. So we will no longer get that extra money. Our state is trying to take away federal funding. Our state is trying to push more charter schools, and our state is trying to do vouchers. How are we going to educate the 90% of kids that are still in our school system? Even if they do vouchers and all of those things, the more money that comes out, the harder it is to educate. And oftentimes it leaves us with our most neediest kids in our school district, which means it costs more to educate them across our schools. And so we really, really, really need to kind of think about those things. The last thing I want to do before I open it up to questions, I want to invite you all out to our schools. Come and visit, come and do a walkthrough. If you're ever interested, call me. We are happy to have you in our schools so you can visually see what's going on in our schools. We're not trying to hide anything. There's no hidden agenda. We want to educate kids. We want to eliminate barriers so that they can learn. We want them to be successful and productive citizens because one day they're going to be taking care of us. And we want to make sure that they're educated and have the right resources and opportunities and skills to be successful in that. And so please come out and visit our elementaries, visit our middle schools, and definitely visit our high schools and visit the academies. I hear a lot about we need more vocational programs in our schools. We have vocational programs in every high school across Metro Nashville Public Schools. They're just named differently. They're called the academies now. So it used to be vocational, then it changed to career and technical, now it's called the Academies of Nashville. So we have technical and vocational programs in all of our 12 high schools across Metro Nashville Public Schools. Please come and check them out. Please come and visit and see what we're doing within our schools, and then hop in and volunteer. If you want to read to students, we welcome you to be a reader to students. If you want to help tutor, please come in and help tutor. We need students, we need community involved. It takes a village, and it's going to take all of us to ensure that our students are successful. Now I'll open it up to questions. Do we have any questions? Got it.
You need to get on TV. You need to get on TV. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I do also want to point out as well, we have Matt Faxton. If you're not familiar with how politics works in Tennessee, each political party in the state has a county party. Republicans have one, Democrats have one. And those parties are organized, their leadership is called an executive committee. In Nashville, you have one male and one female representative for each council district represented on our committees, both Republican and Democrat. Mr. Thaxton is here. He is running to represent us in District 13 on the Democratic Executive Committee. And so he's got his petition here. He needs 25 signatures to get on the ballot. I believe the election is in May.
It's in March. It's on the.
It's during the presidential primary. So I'm sure he would appreciate if you would sign his petition. We haven't had a representative for the last couple of years. Even before that, he was on there for 1 year. Before that, we had nobody. I was on there in 2019, so we have not had, shocker, our district has not had stable, consistent leadership for the last few years. And so it'd be great to have him on, to have some representation on that body. And I also would like to wish everybody happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. If you need to get in touch with me, you can pick up on my card, but russ.bradford@nashville.gov. My office number, that goes to my voicemail, but I get notified. My cell number is right there. Thank you.
Thank you.